We're live.
Good evening. Welcome to the special planning board meeting of March 31st, 2025. To discuss the 76 North Broadway school and 50 some odd units. And the traffic is solely on traffic this evening. So we're going to confine our thoughts on traffic. And this is a work session. Public is welcome to listen, but limited to no comments. Okay. You want to open with something or?
I just want to thank the board again for accommodating us with this session. I'm just going to turn it over directly to Carlito Holt from DTS Providence to go through the traffic session. If we could just promote this possible.
While he's doing that, I forgot to introduce who's here. Sarah Palermo, she's on the gatekeeping for Zoom. Is Ed Marin, the village administrator.
Elaine Du from Akara.
I couldn't remember your last name. Okay. Mary Ann Stessage, village attorney. Lori Davidowitz on the board. Dan McGillicuddy. I'm Cesar Manfredi, Mike Smith, and Mike Bafuco. Go ahead.
Good.
Yep.
Sarah, there also should be a Leanne Ortega.
Okay.
From my office.
Yeah, I should have said if you want to be promoted, you have to read this.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Just for those who just entered, this is a special meeting on traffic, 76 North Broadway, nothing else.
Well, good evening, everyone. Carlito Holt. Oh, microphone.
Oh,
You didn't give him a microphone. It's cutting into your 15 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Carlito Holt with DTS Provident. We submitted a letter dated March 19th, 2025, which really delved into more detail on developing the vehicle trip distribution, which coming out of last meeting, I think was the biggest question revolving around the traffic study. So what I want to do now is just take some time and go through that March 19th letter in more detail as to how we arrived at the latest trip distribution. But by all means, it's a work session. So if you have any questions along the way, please jump in and, let's make this as productive as possible, having back and forth where necessary.
In order to avoid talkovers, if you want to interrupt them, don't just interrupt, just raise your hand and, okay? Because otherwise we get talkover and the record gets all filed up.
So in our March 19th letter, it kind of stepped through the process of how we arrived at the latest trip distribution. So I'm going to jump really to the exhibits that are attached and verbalize what we were looking at. Hold on, let me just zoom on this a little. Oops, that's the wrong way. So if you recall from prior marketing studies that we had provided, we arrived at a 3-mile radius surrounding the property. We had looked at 5 mile as well, but I believe everyone agreed that 3 miles was the most appropriate radius. At the last meeting, one of the questions was, well, if you're on the periphery of that 3-mile radius, how long would it take you to travel to and from the site during those peak hours? And I think 15 minutes was kind of thrown out as a general guideline. Much more than that, you're probably stretching it as to like who would want to bring their student or their child as a student to the school beyond that 15-minute travel time. So what this exhibit shows is we looked at 24 locations on the periphery. I'm just gonna stand up and kind of walk through it. I'm not blocking you, right, Mike? So you can see they're labeled A through X all the way around. And what we're able to do with those 24 points is actually go into Google Maps, the application, drop a pin at that location, and then pick a travel time or an arrival time during the peak hours. So we looked at a period during the peak AM commuter period, a period during the peak PM commuter period, and then a midday period for each of those locations.
Can you just define the actual times of the peaks, like from what time to what time?
Yeah, so I want to get into that. Yep, yeah, I'll get into that in future attachments. So we look at each location, both an arrival time as well as a departure time, because, it's one thing if you can get your kid to the school in 5 minutes, but if it takes you a half hour to get home, it's probably not, for you, let's say. So this exhibit just shows the 3-mile radius and then the 24 points that we looked at. And then if you scroll ahead. This a little cleaner this time. So this exhibit is actually location A on that map, and you can see on the key map here, that's an area to the extreme north in Sleepy Hollow. So we looked at during non-peak times, both arrival and departure. During the AM peak time, both arrival and departure. PM peak, both arrival and departure. And then the values you see on the right-hand side of each map is the average or the approximated travel time during that time period. So
You can't see the number on the left. Slide is,
well, no, it's all the numbers on the right. So that's not my touch screen.
oh, okay.
Sorry.
I got it.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, it's just the number for the,
Yeah.
I thought the number would be better for the non-traffic time. Okay.
Yeah, so on average, it said this route, and if you zoom in, here, let me zoom in for.
But that's okay. If you're gonna-
So you can see we actually pick a spot that they'd be traveling from, pick the site, and it gives you an approximate time during that non-peak time of 10 to 14-minute travel time to get from that point to the site. So we did that for all 24 locations, both arriving and departing during AM, PM, and non-peak times.
I thought it would be a lot better than 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, you thought the travel time would be better?
The travel time for the non-busy would be a lot better, but
Yeah, well, bear in mind, that's the extreme north.
compared to the congested time, it's only 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is a range, so you could say that, if someone was able to get there in 10 minutes, they might be more on the extreme during the AM peak time and it takes them 16, so that,
Depends on which lights you hit.
yeah. Which it's all that data, right? Google is compiling all that data, so one person might do it in 8 minutes, but like they get thrown out as like an anomaly. So I don't think we want to go through all 24 locations.
Day, was it?
We picked, I believe it was Wednesday. Yeah, a typical
March
Wednesday,
12th.
like a Wednesday, so midweek. And Lori, to your point, so for the AM, we chose a depart at time of 7:45 AM. Again, on a typical Wednesday, midweek.
What would the earliest drop-off time for the
This-
daycare preschool be?
School opens at 7.
So I think Mike's question was there a particular date that you did this?
So we were just picking a regular weekday midweek. So we chose a Wednesday. You know, when looking at it, if like you chose like a Thursday, you know, it's generally within the same time frame. We stayed away from, obviously we stayed away from weekends and stayed away from Mondays and Fridays. You know, typically the travel patterns are more regular Tuesday to Thursday.
And the Sleepy Hollow schools and Tarrytown schools were open.
If I may interrupt quickly, so this is from Google and they take an aggregate of average Wednesdays of whatever given period of
Okay.
a year or so. Yeah.
So like when we did it, I don't remember exactly what date, it was say March 10th. So we were picking a date in advance or ahead of the date that we were looking. And then Google says, all right, if they want to go on a Wednesday at that time, let me go through all the historical data I have. And that's how long it took someone on average to get from that point to this point.
I never realized that.
I think you should explain out there's no problem.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Sorry.
Good?
Yes.
So then taking, I'm actually gonna skip ahead to this exhibit.
And we're all 24 points.
Go ahead.
We're all 24 points on the circle within the 15-minute travel time.
Now you're stealing my thunder.
Oh,
That's what this
sorry.
pretty table is.
Okay.
So taking all those, travel times that we mapped out using Google Maps during the different, time of day, we prepared this summary table. So you can see on the left-hand side of the table, all the locations. The first column is the non-peak average arrival time, non-peak average departure time, then we get into AM peak departure, PM peak arrival, PM peak departure. So what you see, and it's a little hard to see, but everything in orange essentially was on average within that 15-minute time frame. Anything in pink started getting, I'm sorry, anything in orange is arriving from the north, anything in pink is arriving from the south. So it's hard to see, but you know, this is kind of the cutoff of those locations.
You're going to have to point where the orange is, because I don't see it.
So it's here. So let me go back to.
See, it's like 11 at the bottom.
It's
Oh, now I can see
essentially
it.
location.
Suggests to you that it's 11.
Yeah, I thought it looked yellow.
Essentially.
I saw it, Mike Smith pointed out that there was a lavender color at the bottom of that chart. The one that you showed.
Yeah. Yeah, so everything in orange was oriented to the north, everything in that lavender or pinkish color was oriented to the south. So it was essentially like location P is the cutoff. So anything P south oriented to the south, anything O north oriented to the north. So, so just going back to the table, all the locations, all the arrival times. So you can see, for the most part, everything's within the general 15-minute time frame. You have some 17 minutes here and here, an 18-minute there. I think the highest was the 21 minutes right here. Some other 20 minutes, but overall, everything I think generally within 15-minute plus or minus. Now, what I would note is that what we found is that some of the longer times, albeit still generally within 15 minutes, were oriented to the south, but we kept everything in the 3-mile radius. We weren't removing anything.
The end location, which you said was 21 minutes,
This location AM departure was on average 21 minutes.
That, my memory of the map, that's around the eastern part of, the western part of Greenberg,
Yes.
which is, what your population is 17,000.
That's just one point, yeah.
I'll make a point of that later.
These, the north and south is based on physical location or the route given by Google Maps?
The route given by Google Maps.
What was the arrival time that you used? For the peak or?
7:45 for the AM. And a 5 PM departure time for the PM.
What is 7:45 the expected start time or arrival time
Arrival time.
of students?
I'm sorry. Depart at 7:45 AM. For the AM.
So what's the expected, when's the start time of the school?
7 AM.
7 a.m.
So that would be the non-peak, like the non-peak times. So we were looking at it, you know, really we're analyzing the peak hours. So we want to make sure that we're hitting those peak hours to see what's reasonable for a travel time for people arriving and departing. But I think it's also important to note what it is during non-peak times as well, to give a sense of how much more time is added during the peak times that people may avoid pick up and drop off, or they may find it too far to enroll their child in the school. So this summary table, you know, to us, it didn't categorically dismiss any of those 24 locations based upon the average travel time. And, you know, what I would note is that this 21, right, that was 21 for the AM peak departure. During non-peak times, it'd be 15. During PM times, it's 16. So even though there's the one time that it may be greater than 15, there's other times that it's closer to the 15.
I can't see that from here, and I don't remember looking at it. What's the next location up and down from the 21? What are the adjacent numbers to the 21?
19 and 20.
Oh, so the three of them are on the high end.
Yeah, they're all.
That's all Western Greenberg.
Item always Western Greenberg. Yeah, I think all, you know, anything L down to R. S is actually in Ardsley.
Were those routes that Google gave you, would those be the northern approach? Would that add to the northern traffic?
No, anything, so right here, so take location P. When we put in going to the site during a non-peak time for location P, it sent the traffic from the north. Same location, leaving the site, going back to its destination, location P, during the AM peak, it was the 21 minutes, but it sent it south. So right when you're on that precipice, you get a shift.
It sent it south, it doesn't mean that would be the
Google
from the north.
Maps projects that that's the quickest travel route.
It means that part of it would be coming from the north, heading south on 9.
Arriving to the site coming from the north. This one, it says it's leaving the site going south to get back to its destination.
Oh, okay.
So when you're on that cusp, like depending upon the time of day and the traffic, it may shift. That's really 1, 2, 3 locations where you saw that. Everything else, it was the same orientation.
That's critical later on, because that's Western Greenberg. I don't know how you prorate. You had contributed in the population circle that Greenberg was 17,000 and change. And how much of that is going to go if they have to travel 21 minutes?
Right.
And is that 17 a real number? That's the population, but when you get, if the Weston Greenberg has to travel 21 minutes or 20 minutes one way or the other, how many of, in that Weston Greenberg population of 17,000 are going to travel 21 minutes? And I was wondering if you prorated the 17,000, is that prorated on these traffic times, the travel times? Or probably not.
No, for Greenberg, we split it 80-20.
Yeah. Okay. When you get to the population map, we'll discuss it further.
So really just coming back to this table, the takeaway was that all the areas captured within the 3-mile radius, in our opinion, were acceptable locations that people would potentially send their child to this school. So then,
What were the travel times from Elmsford using this chart? I forget the letters.
okay. So those are locations I, J, and K. So I was anywhere from 11.5 to 14 minutes. J seemed to be the longest. That ranged from 12 to 17 minutes. And K was 11.5 to 17 minutes.
Okay. Again, the question is, how much of the number you assigned to Greenberg in population? If not Greenberg, Elmsford is 17 minutes, how many of the population you split, did that take into consideration the longer travel time from Elmsford? And the answer is probably no. If you understood what I said.
Yeah, well, I did. And I think what we were trying to do in this exercise is define the radius that you
Yeah.
can capture a population that could be reasonably expected to enroll their child, and then drill down into those locations more specifically with population data. So, that's the next component of this is we went back to the marketing company to get more definitive and finite population data for each of the areas that we're defining in the 3-mile radius. So I'm gonna kind of skip ahead and then jump back. So this map now highlights in different colors all the areas captured within the 3-mile radius, broken out by the different municipalities. And so what we then did is we went back to the marketing company who is able to give us a more specific population for those captured areas in the 3-mile radius. And that's in attachment C of the letter. You can see all the information from Calibrate. So this location here was Ardsley, and you can see here the estimated population of 4618. With Ardsley, it was all captured. So really the more critical components were the municipalities that a portion were captured in the 3-mile radius. I think this is where you were potentially going, Mr. Chairman. So this is Dobbs Ferry, again, 100% captured. Elmsford, almost 100% captured.
Question.
Irvington was 100% captured, obviously. Sleepy Hollow, geographic area. Not as substantially captured, but it's capturing the most densely populated portion of Sleepy Hollow. So that area that's captured it is the 7985 here that they're able to quantify through the marketing data or through the software that the marketing company uses. Terrytown, 100% captured. Hastings, we captured a very extreme northern portion. So
50 people.
50 people.
You sure it wasn't 51?
It might have been 49.
Okay.
Sorry. Is that for Hastings?
Carlito, if I may ask, I notice your calibrate reports have drawn polygon. Do you have that polygon to show? Or but
Yeah, I mean,
was
it's
the 3 mile
this,
circle?
yeah. So, like for Sleepy Hollow, the polygon is the area bounded by the 3 mile radius. Everything in purple, right, is the polygon for Sleepy Hollow. That's Greenberg. After Sleepy Hollow. Oh, what's going on with my attachment, man? Yeah, these things and then the next attachment. Oh, wait. Oh, I missed the attachment. Sorry. So Greenberg, which you're asking about, in that polygon captured the 17,000 population, and then of that 17,000, we estimated 80% oriented to the north and 20% oriented to the south. So using the actual populations from Calibrate that we captured for each of these colored areas in the 3 mile radius, we put all the populations in this table. So you can see Sleepy Hollow, 7985, Elmsford, et cetera, down to Hastings with the 50. And then for Greenberg, we assumed an 80-20 split. And Irvington, we had a 50-50 split, which I know was a question that came up because of the proximity of the site further north. So I'll get into that a little bit further, but with this distribution and the more finite population data within the 3 mile radius, we arrived at a trip distribution of 64.5% oriented to the north and 35.5% oriented to the south.
So can you explain how you did that?
How we got to the 64.5. So
Before that, right? The numbers before that, how did you split the north-south in Tarrytown and Irvington?
In Greenberg and Irvington.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We estimated it. We're trying to work with the marketing consultant. What we found is they're relying like on GIS data. So when you have a municipal boundary, which is mapped in GIS, and you give them a specific radius from a like coordinate, which is our site, they're able to determine that polygon. So we were trying to draw like a cordon line and say, give us north and south, and they're working on that, but we have to give them specific coordinates of that cordon line. So it's become a little more cumbersome than anticipated. But what we were looking at with Irvington in particular is if you even shifted it like 90-10, the distribution still falls within that 60-40 range, which I think is a key aspect, because we've looked at the 60-40 as part of our sensitivity analysis. So even if you extremely conservatively say 90-10 for Irvington, 90 oriented to the south, you're still going to be in that 60-40 range. So like your point, we take the total population. So that's the top table, and come up with the total population of 6540, 499 in the captured area. And then we looked at what portion of that population is to the north, what portion is to the south. So we're taking all of Sleepy Hollow, Elmsford, Tarrytown. In this calculation, 50% of Irvington and 80% of Greenberg equates to the 42,217. And then we have 50% of Irvington, 20% of Greenberg, Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley, and Hastings. There should be an 8 there to get to the 35.5%.
So it's simply a matter that the distribution of possible clients. Let's call it
Population.
Population.
Not possible. Everybody in the entire, not people.
Yeah.
It just happens to be that 64% is north of the site and 30.
This doesn't focus on families with children.
It's just a general population,
Just general population.
and the mix, it is assumed to be spread across those populations, because, if we look at a population, if we look at one household today, in 2 years, it might be a different mix, but another household, could be a similar mix than that household. So we have to go with the total population.
In the previous market study data that we provided showed there was sufficient population of that age range in the 3 mile region.
To get back to the age-old question of certainly the population numbers you're presenting of potential. And then how many are actual reality? And I think the travel times where I was going with that is, if anybody is at the high end of travel time, do you really, the potential, it seems to me, the potential is not everybody in the 3 mile radius, because you have a longer travel time. That's what I meant. Did you possibly consider travel times to reduce the number of people coming from Elmsford as opposed to strict population? And again, the strict population again is a potential, unless you do go to door and say, would you go down to Irvington?
Right, but even if you go door to door, the people you survey may not be living there when the school's open.
That's true, but my point is, it may be very optimistic that use the total number of people from Elmsford or even Sleepy Hollow because of the travel times. And Weston Greenberg was also high numbers of trout, 21, I think he said. And that's an overall issue with at least 3 of us, that maybe 4 or 5, I'm not sure, that the potential is there, but how do you account for the actual use? And you said 60-40 in mitigation, and it's not, there's no real way, and we discussed this with Elaine, there's no real way of telling how many of that potential is actually going to go to to support the 60-40. And, you know, how many from the north are really gonna come south if the travel times, say, from Elmsford are high? So, and it's difficult for the board to say, oh, this is the best number we can get, but we have to decide, and it's gonna heavily impact the village for another generation. And it's difficult to rely on, that's the best number we can get. So, and then of course, the study by the Transportation Committee was 40-60. And we were talking and possibly utilize, do an analysis like you did 60-40 and 70-30, to do a 50-50 analysis and what that mitigation might be. And then take the worst case, the most mitigation of the three choices and implement that as a worst case scenario. In case the mitigations are different, which I'm sure they are, one may be more or one may be less. Elaine, did I say that correctly?
Yeah, so in terms of the splits, you're right. It's not exact math, right? This is as close of an estimate that we can get. And there's a lot of concerns surrounding traffic, and we've looked at 70-30, 60-40, and the applicant has also looked at mitigations for these scenarios. And with other parties also arguing for a different split, 50-50 may be a reasonable worst case scenario to analyze if this is what the board wants. And in terms of the mitigation, whichever is the worst case of those three, it would be appropriate to mitigate to whatever is the worst of the three.
Right. She interpreted what I said, but I think I said it almost the same. And we'd like to have your thoughts on doing a 50-50 split analysis on what mitigation might be needed. Counselor?
I don't have a specific answer at 50-50 because we didn't look at it yet.
Well, that's why I asked Counselor.
And I think this is the most detailed traffic distribution I've ever seen done, where
I'm
you know,
sure it is.
we drilled into the actual population and then arrived at, you know, and looked at travel routes and travel times and the actual population within the 3 mile areas, you know, going beyond the census data. So this is not just some estimate that we came up with. This is the most detailed traffic distribution that has, I think, ever been done that I'm aware of. So it's not just a guess. And now to say, well, just ignore the data, ignore the calibrate, let's just do 50-50, which is
I don't
an
think I said
expensive
that.
proposition to undertake.
We appreciate the thoroughness of what you did, but perhaps it's very expensive or not possible to translate the potential of population into how much of that potential is going to actually go, you know, at the outer perimeter of the 3 miles. And the biggest populations, Elmsford, for example, and the western part of Greenberg, are from the north. And it's to kind of fuzzy, it's a little fuzzy as that you can't really tell that. So as a margin of error, we don't want to make an error on something that's not as accurate as it possibly can be. And it may be that you're never going to get the accurate error because like you said, even if you went door to door, you don't know. You'll never know. Does the potential that's there translate into actual numbers north and south? And as in order to not make a mistake that'll last for generations, or at least a generation, or until you're in business, and to cause a tremendous issue of traffic in the village, I'm not willing to go on the assumption that all that population is going to come from the north, especially since the bigger numbers are from the north. If the potential is real, it's from the north and it supports the 60-40.
I mean, I think the bigger numbers are from the south.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that we showed.
Well, the same is true for the south, but my gut says the south is more accurate, and there is a number for Good Shepherd. And I don't think that the 40/60 of Good Shepherd is as accurate, because the demographics are different for the use of that facility than the use for this facility. So maybe that's an exaggeration in the other direction. So in order to be prudent, 50/50 in my mind, and at the recommendation of our consultant is something that we would like to see, and then pick the worst case mitigation for the three choices.
Caesar, if I might add something, I thought the board also was saying alternatively, this is in place of a survey that has some real information. Yeah, so a more comprehensive survey. I know you guys did this one that didn't work, but apparently there are ways to survey that it costs more money. So you could, if you you could do a survey that shows where the people are gonna come from. But I think what Caesar's saying, do that. In the absence of that, to be safe, you would want to see what the worst case is between 50/50 and 60/40.
And, none of us up here are traffic experts. But we have to use our best judgment and listen to our consultant and our legal counsel. And our own gut feeling. I mean, if I had to use my gut feeling, I don't know, we'll see. Something I have to think about. But we also need to rely on our experts, and that's what we think is the best avenue to proceed. And I have to repeat that we don't want to make a mistake that'll last for a generation. And I want to continue to live in Irvington in peace when I go to the market to get a coffee.
I was just gonna say, there, there are plenty, hundreds, if not more, companies that do market research as, it's what they do for a living. It's, you can hire companies out there. They're very expensive. And so our thought was, as a good alternative, 50/50 is something that probably not as expensive as going out and hiring a professional company to then do and conduct the market research, which is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars.
I'm not expecting an answer, but unless you want to give an answer, because there's some other things we want to talk about. One other thing, actually.
And so I think going back to the table here, this shows that it's within the range of appropriate travel times, right? Within the 15-minute range. But the greatest times were from the south. So if you consider that, it's going to skew more from the north. So if you get rid of those times, it's just going to come more from the north and be a greater distribution from the north, which we didn't account for. It would have been in our favor to get rid of those times from the south. Correct?
Yeah, and I guess I just want to clarify, when you say the higher numbers, are you talking about higher population numbers or higher travel time numbers?
Higher population numbers.
Higher,
Like all of, I mean, if you take Sleepy Hollow, that's 7,000, whatever the number was, 7,000. If you half the Elmsford, which is all north, that changes things also. And so again, it's a range. Everything is a range, and if we're at the wrong end of the range, we have an exacerbated traffic situation. If it's at the wrong end of the range, in order, there's always a plus and minus, and I hate to be on the wrong side of the plus when dealing with a lifetime situation. And that's why we're looking at 50/50. We don't want to make a mistake. And even that may be a mistake, I don't know, but it's with all your data, it's the deviation point that, you know, there's a deviation in all this scientific, statistical analysis. And I don't know what that is, but I think given what the Irvington traffic people said, and given what you said, and giving the deviations that could happen, we'd like to do, and given we talked to the traffic consultant here and our council, and we feel the board, unless anybody's, I'm speaking for the board here.
I agree.
Mike and Mike.
I just want to add, like, we're not saying that you did anything incorrect here, but I think we can all agree that the outcome isn't, we are certain that the actual traffic distribution will be 64, whatever, right? Like we are saying, we are certain that the population distribution,
Mm.
and we're taking a huge risk by saying, okay, if you're right about the population distribution, then that's all going to translate to an actual traffic distribution. And so in order to mitigate that risk, we would either need further analysis, or we're thinking a 50-50 split would help mitigate the risk that we're taking. Because you can agree, we don't have you're not presenting to us a study that says this is going to be the traffic split. You're saying this is the population split. There is nothing to say how likely that is to actually be what we get when we're done. And I'm not saying that you can predict that. We're just trying to assess how much risk we're taking, that you're right. And in order to mitigate that, because it's, you know, as Caesar said, we have to live with it if you're wrong. You need to be comfortable.
Lauren?
Agree. The only thing I'm going back to something that I feel we've discussed in the past. Any market research that you did before deciding that this would be a good site for the apartments and in particular the school. Any local market research. I feel like that you don't necessarily have a report there.
So we did provide that. That's the report that shows there was sufficient population within a 3-mile radius
Right.
of the
But it
0 to
wasn't-
5 range, and
Right.
that they have certain, they meet the criteria of demographics. They have the means to be able to.
Mhm.
So that was done. That's why the
Okay,
site was.
in lieu of, like you would, is your feeling, would a market research be more valuable than a 50-50 for you, or not necessarily? Because wouldn't that also inform a little bit more your assumptions with where people are coming from?
I think the point of the market research is to see if there's sufficient patrons that can support the school, and that's been satisfied. I mean, this, Rocco would not have pursued this site if there wasn't that data out there, and there's the population, the demographics, and everything that goes into that analysis. But that's different from analyzing the population for determining a traffic distribution.
Yeah. Okay.
Dan?
I agree, we do need a more comprehensive study. I agree with Caesar that the population from Elmsford and Greenberg coming from the north would skew it to more of a 50-50.
I don't know. We don't know that.
Well, not definitively. I mean, theoretically, potentials and probabilities, but I think from a practical sense, we do need a more comprehensive study.
Mike, anything further than what you already added?
I agree.
Mike, we can.
Yeah.
Anything else to add? Okay. All right, you can chew on that. We have another issue, and that's if the mitigations eventually from 50-50 and 60-40 included the traffic signal changes. A critical part of that is DOT agreeing to the changes. And that's from the signal group approval, not just, what region is that? Region 7, 8, region 8, up in Poughkeepsie. Could you elaborate on that?
So the traffic signal mitigations as proposed move around just a couple of seconds, and in certain cases, just a fraction, like 1.5 seconds, for instance. Moving around a fraction of a second for the green time of a traffic signal may not be possible on the signal controller itself. So the applicant would need to make sure with DOT that this is actually feasible. And if it's not feasible, or if and to add on to that a bit, the DOT signals group may not want to go out there just to move around 2 seconds of time. So in lieu of just moving around 2 seconds of time and moving around a half second, which is likely not even possible, it's worth looking at different mitigation measures for retiming the corridor in terms of the cycle lengths, that which reduces your lost time at an intersection. I know DOT may ask for additional mitigation measures that include improved coordination along the corridor, which is a possibility, but looking at what's happening at those traffic signals and trying to improve it beyond just moving 1 to 2 seconds is the best way to do it. If DOT does not want to make those small changes.
So that from what I understand, just so that if I didn't understand, I'm sure there's people that didn't understand it. Looking at the corridor means the corridor being, say, from Mercy College to Sunnyside, and all the traffic lights in between would have the capability of talking to each other and changing their cycle on need based on what's there. And that's as opposed to changing 2 seconds on Main Street and 1 second at Sunnyside or something like that, which DOT may not even do. So the bigger plan is to look at the corridor and have the lights talk to each other. And you know what I'm talking about. And including in that is talking to DOT about if we go back a couple of meetings, we're talking about walking across in a hawk light and whether DOT would even entertain a hawk light. If one is going to DOT, that's another question they need to answer. Did we have any concerns with the left-hand turn lane to ask DOT about that?
One thing to note is that in recent applications in the last year or so, DOT has shifted to follow a new federal guideline that says left turn lanes are recommended if you exceed basically 5 cars during a peak hour. And so it is possible, it's a low threshold, and developers and municipalities alike don't necessarily like this rule, but DOT likes to be by the book. And so if with any conversations with DOT, it may be recommended to discuss whether or not a left turn lane would be required based on the volumes that are present. With that being said, it's a question of, if you add a left turn lane, what does it do to capacity on Broadway? And trying to figure out what the right balance is.
We're talking about a left turn coming south on
I believe so, yeah.
on 9, right, and into the
Yeah.
property.
So if I can jump in,
Go right ahead.
we have a meeting scheduled with DOT on Thursday.
This Thursday.
This Thursday. And a lot of these are gonna be topics of conversation. The one part that's still gonna be open-ended is, if we're running a 50-50 analysis, we need to present that to them, right? Because that's part of the issue with moving the needle with DOT is landing on something that the village is comfortable with, that we can then take to DOT and say, this is what we're proposing. Preliminary conversations we've had with them don't indicate they would categorically dismiss minor timing changes. I think one thing to keep in mind is sometimes they're thinking of the timing change as something that they're being tasked to do with their resources and their money or taxpayer money, where this is a different situation where it's all applicant funded. So typically they're more amenable to that if someone else is paying, right? So that's all part of the conversation that we're going to have with them. But I just want to set expectations. We don't know what that final timing adjustment is until we land on a final analysis. So I don't want to I don't want to tell you, hey, we're gonna have a definitive answer
Well,
after
I don't think
Thursday.
you're not gonna have an answer from DOT that quick. If you have any experience. with DOT.
And then as far as the turn lane, that's something we did flag with them early in the process when we had the pre-app meeting with them, and they didn't raise it as an issue as long as we could show the levels of service operated acceptably. Here you have the benefit of having the added lane on Broadway, so that if someone was waiting to make a left, they can bypass. Typically, where they're looking at the dedicated left turn lane is if you only have one lane in each direction. What they don't want is someone waiting to make the left, bogging down all the traffic with no other way around. So, but you know, that's something that's going to be incumbent upon us to demonstrate to them.
Well, keep in mind what she said about approval from the appropriate DOT people, the signal.
Yeah, but if the head of signals is going to be in the meeting on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
I have a question, if you can answer it. Do you think that corridor changes are more effective than 1 second light changes, individual stoplight changes?
I'll answer that question in a general way, is that, yeah, anything done on a macroscopic level is going to be more beneficial than a microscopic level. Which is DOT is doing, right? They're doing this whole corridor study. We're tasked with looking at our proposed project impact. So, to the extent that anything we're recommending more microscopically, we can consider how that benefits if there was to be something that happens along the corridor. You know, like the chair was referring to where the signals talk. Don't worry, there's no noise associated with it. They don't actually. But it's called adaptive traffic
Right.
signal system. So they're all have modems and they communicate with each other wirelessly. So if we could be like a cog in that wheel where we're upgrading with modems, the signals along the corridor that we're studying, that then lets them do a more comprehensive adaptive signal system in the future. You know, I don't see any reason why we would be opposed to that.
It might be beneficial. Okay. The DOT proposal, as we found out recently, would cause an issues. I don't think it's in the foreseeable future, given federal monies. I don't think they want to add to the $2 trillion deficit. But to have traffic circles at Main Street and Sunnyside, and if you come out of anything on the east side of the road, you have to go up to can't go across. You have to go up to the traffic circle, go around and then go south. And it's also true if you're you got to go around the traffic. If you want to come and make a left turn from the north, you can't. You have to go down to the Main Street circle, come around, come up, and then go into the east side.
Right, they want to use the roundabouts as U-turn.
Yeah, and no crossing the double line in the middle, because between Sunnyside and Main Street, there's not enough room for a turning lane, given the walls and the restrictions of property. So that would be DOT's future. And I don't know, I know the village manager brought that concern to DOT, not the way it is, so I don't know where that's going. If that's been resolved yet.
Yeah, it'll definitely be an agenda item on our. Thursday.
Mary Ann, is there anything else?
I don't have anything.
Anybody here? You have anything?
I
By the way,
mean,
we appreciate,
yeah.
it may not sound, but we appreciate all you've done. But again, I want to reiterate, this is a critical thing for the village.
And
We're
we
trying
get
to be
it,
as
we
right as
get
we
it,
can.
and it is a difficult thing, because it's not like we're designing the load of a beam for a building, which, there's more exact,
I
precise
can do
science.
that.
Yeah. So, it is, and as Elaine mentioned, it's an estimate, and it's our best estimate. And in this case, I'd say a very, very, very detailed estimate, and Kathy said, this is the most detailed trip distribution she's done. I mean, I've done hundreds of them and it's the most detailed trip distribution I've done, but we get it, like there's extreme
As you
sensitivity
said.
to it. And
Every word you said was, it's an estimate. And
Yeah.
that's why we want to be sure that the estimate is close to what's gonna happen. That's why we want 50/50. Catherine?
Oh,
Yeah, by the time I told my wife I'd be home at 9:30, so.
So these tables are pretty much works in progress based upon tonight, but what I think, and we can expand on these as we do, I gotta share. Expand on these as we go through any additional analysis. It's amazing how difficult running Zoom is off of one screen. Like, you're so used to having like 3 screens up. Alright. And I don't want to get into too much detail, but you know, maybe we just get some feedback because this is something that we could incorporate into future submittals. But this table, and we have 2 tables, is a proposed mitigation summary table. And
No.
you know, what this is against the level of service criteria that's in the village code. So what we did is we looked at every study location. And then here we have the 3 different distributions. So we had the original 70/30, the most recent 64.5, 35.5, and then the 60/40. And then under each of those, we arrived at a student population that would require some level of staggering. With the 70/30, no staggering. With the 60/40, if you recall, we had a staggering that would only allow 134 students to come during the peak AM period and 100 students to depart during the peak PM period, or they had to depart before the peak PM period and only have 100 students remaining at the peak PM period. So, in addition to those student populations or the student staggering, there was some additional mitigation through retimings, or minor restriping improvements. So what we tried to highlight in here with each of these distributions is for each location, where we saw the village code criteria being exceeded. And then where it was exceeded, what was the recommended mitigation to allow it to meet the village code criteria? So you can see a number of the locations comply, but we do have locations that, you know, here at Main Street. Well, this is the queuing one, even though it says level of service.
Can you zoom in to show
No,
one
we
peak
can't
hour?
read it.
That's very.
Yeah. I'm gonna zoom in here. So like Main Street and Field Point and Route 9, you can see during the AM under the 70/30, it complied. 64/34, 5.5 complied, and 60/40 complied from a level of service standpoint. Matheson Park, that we exceeded the code by 1.05 seconds on the southbound approach during the AM hour. So we did a timing modification under the 70/30. That same approach exceeded by 1.61 seconds under that distribution and 2.01 seconds on the 60/40. So, you know, I think one of the benefits of this is to give you an order of magnitude, right? You can see, you know, here's a location, Heritage Hill Road, which is to the south. So as you add more distribution, the increase, you know, is fractions of a second or a second, as you shift more traffic to the south. All of which we need to adequately mitigate. So we prepared that for the level of service criteria and the Q criteria. So we would intend to include that in any future submittal. So it kind of gives you, I think what to your point, gives you kind of like that menu of options, right? At each distribution, what's the mitigation you know, why is the mitigation needed? Like, what was the code provision that was being exceeded? And how are we bringing it back to code?
All right, in terms of the staggering, and Marion, correct me if I'm wrong. And since this is not the usual permit by resolution, the approval, it's a permit.
It's a special permit.
And if you have staggering numbers, we could put those numbers in the permit and ask for monitoring to make sure that doesn't change after the first day. When people say, I don't like that, I'm gonna come at this time. So there is a monitoring.
Yeah, we do, at Mercy, we do monitoring for a different reason.
Right.
For the park, because the parking was an issue there. So we do monitoring there with the
Yeah,
regular.
But just so you understand that there'd be a record keeping on the staggering.
Oh, yeah.
The success of any staggering, that's a mitigation. To make sure it stays in effect.
And to Caesar, to your point, then we would need like how many students come between
Yeah.
what
there
time
has
and
to
what
be a
time.
Clear definition of
Yeah.
who's coming and going at what time. And then the documentation to verify that as a permit requirement.
What you told student population?
180, I recall.
But what you just described would have come to, two numbers you gave came to over to like to 214 or something.
No, on the 60-40, when we did the sensitivity.
No, the number of students, you were talking about how many kids would come at what time and how many would come at another time. And when I added the two numbers together, it was
Yeah, I think I
200
just
something.
misspoke.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I was gonna say,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
it goes
under
away
the
to 180.
60-40, we said that we needed during the AM hour to restrict 56 students. So there could only be 134 students that would be allowed,
124.
134 that would be
No,
allowed.
it's 56, 124.
And then on the, and the same.
She's good at math.
I have that.
Just to be
Okay,
clear,
so-
that it is 180. The
The
students
school is proposed to be
Right
180
of the-
students.
Okay,
of the adding and subtracting.
yeah.
It's 180. Mike,
So can you just explain to me where it says AM 2.01 seconds southbound? I assume SB is southbound?
Yes.
What does that mean? What is the 2.01 seconds?
So the code has criteria from a level of service and average vehicle delay standpoint. Essentially, if you're a level of service A through D, right, level of service are given in grades A through F. If you're a level of service A through D, you're allowed degradation within the A through D. If you're an A through D and it goes to an E or an F, then you need to propose mitigation. If it's already an E, then you can't take it to an F, but you also can only increase it by 10% average delay, and same with an F. If it's an F, you can only increase it by 10% average delay. So what you're seeing for that AM 2.01 seconds, that's how many seconds it was above what was allowed.
So how much of a degradation is that?
I'd have to
I
go
mean,
back.
it's 2.01 seconds above something. So
Yeah.
what is it above? That's what I'm trying.
If I had to guess, it's probably already a level of service F, so it's probably in the neighborhood of 90 seconds. So it'd be allowed to go to 99, and maybe it went to 101.
Okay, so on that assumption, so if it was 90 seconds, now you're talking about change, okay.
So just to give a little context, I think I'm looking at the 70-30 at the Sunnyside Lane intersection for the westbound approach. Under no build, it would be an LOSF with 93.1 seconds, which degrades to 106.2 seconds in the build condition. And so they need to bring that down. And the number of seconds that they're showing here is how much they're over by in terms of the threshold.
So so to mitigate that, in addition to having to, that's how much it's above
What's allowed?
what's allowed. That's not what you would be changing would you be looking to ask the OT to change the signal, for example? by that
To get it
2.01
back,
sec-
to get it back below what's allowed.
To change it to the 2.01 seconds, to reduce.
To reduce it by at least 2.01 seconds.
And even if you did that, you still need to stagger like 56 students.
in that sensitivity analysis.
Right?
Correct, not necessarily for that location, right? To Elaine's point, if we go to that location,
I'm talking
without
about-
anything, it
No, I'm
exceeds.
talking about the 60-40. I'm just going on.
Oh, yeah, no, I,
Worst case, because that seems to be the worst case scenario that's been presented there. So
Yeah.
you'd have to do 2.01 seconds and also you'd have 56 students staggered.
correct.
Okay.
This to everybody understands, the code has numbers in it that were generated by a previous study several years ago by AKF. And the-
Well, but by the zoning, but the zoning provisions were provided by AKLF.
yeah, and there's numbers in there and that limit in traffic talk, numbers that limit what it can exceed.
Yeah,
And-
what would
and-
be a significant impact?
Right, and I guess the 2.1 was exceeding the numbers in the code.
What would be permitted?
That's how
under
much
code.
it's over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some degradation allowed in the code, but not more than the number that's in the code. And that's what they've been talking about, the increase over the code. The zoning code that was changed to accommodate the building of what's being proposed. Okay,
I mean, just in the context of the DOT, they don't often see, they may not see making a change of 1.05 seconds to be that significance to warrant making that change, because it's not going to really, in their view, be a mitigation measure. But we're trying to comply with the specific parameters of this code. So this is a village sort of requirement that is setting what is a significant adverse impact, even though the DOT may not see it as an impact at all, but
They
the
don't live
village
here.
does, right?
Yeah.
So that's,
Are you saying that the DOT may not think that that kind of change is impactful enough? Because if it's not impactful enough, then for us, the code tells us that anything more than a 10% degradation is a significant
So,
problem.
so I
So it could be,
think,
for us, it could be just a little bit over 10% and we're done, right?
yeah,
So the fact that DOT may think that this mitigation measure isn't impactful would say to me, well, then we can't.
no, that's the
So-
opposite of that.
so I think with DOT, they don't have the context or the intimacy with this application, the code provisions, right? So like, if we just went to them and I'm doing a traffic study and I need to lower the average delay by 2 seconds on an approach, I want to shift 1 second of green time from that phase to this phase, they're going to be like, why bother? Right? But if we put it in the context of we need to do it because there's a code provision, then I think that gets them to act in a more favorable manner for this particular situation.
okay. Ed? Anything?
No, it's traffic.
Elaine?
Nothing to add here,
Eric?
except that, these mitigation standards are essentially industry standard as well. We see them in many communities across Westchester, so even though, you know, it may not necessarily be what DOT wants, it's what a lot of communities locally want.
Okay, Marianne?
The only thing I wanted to clarify, I said it before, but I think you got it, is asking for the 50-50 split is kind of in lieu of, you're actually giving us information, reliable information on where the students are gonna come from. That's an option for you. If you could do that, if you could do a research study that has enough data to be reliable as to where the students are gonna come from, you could do that. But the board's thinking was that could be very burdensome, very expensive. So another way to deal with it is to get a 50-50.
It's still somewhat unreliable. Somewhat,
Well,
be better, but. Okay,
I have a question.
Go.
Do you have a record of the school start and dismissal times in our town, in the village by any chance? Like, because you're referencing Heritage Hill, which is where the middle school and high school are. And I think those times are really important for you to think about.
So we analyzed the third peak hour. So traditionally you analyze that peak AM commuter period and the peak PM commuter period. We also analyze what we call a midday period, really closer to the PM period. But we analyze that peak school hour in our analysis. So we did look at that.
All right, because it's highly concentrated and the AM is the bigger problem for you than the PM, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, that's how you come up with the peak hour.
Yes, no, I realize that, but it,
Well, the thing with the AM is it overlaps with the commuter period
Yes,
too. So
yes.
that's like a double
Yeah.
edged sword.
If it's going home, the kids go home different hours, clubs and sports. And
Mhm.
Dunkin' Donuts,
what's that?
Dunkin' Donuts. I know not to go anywhere near the Dunkin' in my town,
Yeah.
like when middle school gets out.
We don't have any.
Okay. Yeah,
Nothing further.
Mike and Mike,
Nothing.
Nothing for me.
I think we're done. Do you have anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay, I have one last thing. You didn't submit anything for Wednesday's regular meeting? Okay, so anybody who thought they were going to come Wednesday to further hear 76 Broadway, they're not on the agenda. They didn't submit anything for Wednesday. So you're welcome to come to hear the rest of the agenda, but they're not going to be on the agenda Wednesday. With that, I think the meeting is closed for today, March 31st. I'm glad it wasn't tomorrow, April 1st. So thank you for all coming and thank you for the presentation. And the meeting is closed.